Here we're going to take a look at the project for Accounting 102. In shared files, you have three things relating to this project. You have the narrative, which you see here. You have the T accounts, and you have a set of Excel files. So let's take a look at the beginning of this narrative. Premium Pooch Palaces, and we'll use PPP throughout to stand for Premium Pooch Palaces. It's a manufacturer of pet homes, and they can make some pretty fancy dog houses. Okay, their cost accounting system includes a general and subsidiary ledgers and cost accounting forms. However, for our purposes, in place of the general journal and general ledger, we're just going to be using some T accounts. And we're not even going to be using T accounts for all of the accounts. We're just going to use some T accounts for some selected accounts so that we can focus on the subsidiary ledgers, which is the main part of this project. So for your end of month schedules and statements, you will need to use accounting paper, which you can use physical, real accounting paper and handwrite on it and scan it to me or hand it to me. Or you can use electronic versions of accounting paper, which are available, and then you just type on it and upload those as Word documents. Okay. Be sure to have your headings and labels where appropriate on everything. The subsidiary ledgers are on Excel, and you need to fill them out on Excel. Most of you have had some form of experience with Excel or another spreadsheet program, or you've had CPT 170 before you got to this class, and so this should not be a problem. If there's anyone who does not feel comfortable with Excel, please get a hold of me and I will run you through, because you don't have to do formulas, you don't have to do anything difficult on it. Okay, but you do need to be able to navigate around the various screens and tabs and punch the numbers into the various cells. If you are physically giving me your project when it's due, it will need to be in a folder, and copying is never allowed. The June transactions have been put into the T accounts and the subsidiary ledgers on Excel for you. And you have to then do the July transactions, but you'll have the June transactions to look at. You're going to be submitting to me the following things: the T accounts for your selected accounts, your materials ledger, your job cost sheets, and your finished goods ledger, and your overhead analysis sheets. Those four things are all on Excel. Your cost of goods manufactured statement and your multiple step income statement, which you'll do at the end of the month of activity. This next sheet you can read through yourself. It basically just goes through and discusses the different subsidiary ledgers that we have, such as the materials ledger, the job cost ledger, which the job cost sheets are the subsidiary ledger for work in process account, the finished goods ledger, and the departmental overhead analysis sheet. Technically, which is not a subsidiary ledger, it only shows the things that are on the actual side of the overhead account, or the debit side, or the inside. Okay, it doesn't show anything that's allocated out of the overhead account into work in process. Only the actual costs that are being accumulated in the overhead T account. Okay, in real life, of course, there would also be a subsidiary ledger for accounts receivable and accounts payable, and typically a depreciation schedule, which is like a subsidiary ledger for all the long-term assets. However, again, we're just focusing on the inventory accounts. Okay, so here the next page shows you the transactions of June. And so let's go through a couple of these transactions step by step. So the very first one, on June the 5th, materials were issued, and this is lumber. So the materials were issued out of the materials storeroom and went into the factory floor, which means that in the books they need to be shown as coming out of the materials account and into the work in process account. Now this first one is a requisition number 610 for job number 100, and it's $13,000. So your first step is to show this on the T accounts. So we go to the T accounts, and this is your $13,000 here that's coming out of the materials account and going into the work in process account. These are direct materials, of course. If they were indirect materials, they would come out of materials and go into overhead. But direct materials go out of the materials storeroom and go into work in process. Okay, and so you would have put those two there in your T accounts. These first numbers on the T accounts are beginning balances, and then all on the left side of each T account shows what comes in, and on the right side shows what comes out. Materials being issued means they're coming out, and so I'm going to have to put this $13,000 on the outside of the T account, and it's coming in to the factory floor, so it's coming into work in process. And again, the inside is on the left and the outside is on the right. All right, so now we've finished with our T accounts, and we need to go to the Excel subsidiary ledger sheets. Now we had $13,000 coming out of the materials ledger. Notice along the bottom you have these 4 tabs. And those are the 4 subsidiary ledgers that you have to deal with. And so we're going to go to the materials ledger, and we're going to find lumber. Lumber is the very first material. And so you would punch in the date, you would punch in 6/5, and then the Excel program would retype that as 5-June. And you go to your reference column, and that's the requisition 610, so you would put R610, and then you would go over to the issued side. Notice there's a receive side. This is when we purchase materials and we're receiving them. They're coming in to the materials storeroom. That's going to go in the receive side. When it's coming out, where we're issuing them, they're being requisitioned. That means they're going out, and they're going to come in this column. So the $13,000 is there. Okay, and then we have a balance column. And so the balance to start with is listed first. That was $20,000. Now, we took out of the storeroom $13,000 worth, and so I take $20,000 that was there to begin with, minus the $13,000 that just went out, and I have $7,000 left. in the materials account. Now the other account that we had put in on the T accounts was the work in process account, and that involves the job cost sheets. So we're going to click here on the job cost sheet tabs, and that brings up the job cost sheets. And then you're going to find job 100 was the job. So here's job 100, and again under the date you would put 6/5. Under the requisition number you would put R610. Under the amount you would put 13,000. And notice that there's a materials section, there's a direct labor section, and there's an overhead applied section on each job cost sheet. The job cost sheet lists who the customer is, what job number it is, when we started it, and the quantity that we're going to make for that job. Now this particular job is just our own stock, and we can sell to various customers from this stock. So it doesn't have a set quantity for this particular one. Okay, so here is our 13,000, and notice there was a balance to begin with in this job for materials of $2,021.72. Okay, so we can go back. So that was the first one. We're now done with it. Okay, requisition 611 for $768.50 for job 121, and that would also be lumber. So you would do the same thing. You would go to the T accounts. Here's your $768.50 coming out of the materials account, going into the work in process account. Then you find job 121, which is right here. There's your 5th of June, your R611, your $768.50. And you would be done with that one. Okay? Now, requisition 612 for job 132 is the same thing. It's still lumber, all those. But requisition 612 also shows, it says, $3,105 of weather stripping, shingle cement, and wiring. So the direct materials for this job are lumber, shingles, and windows. And so all this other stuff, weather stripping, shingle cement, wiring, this is all indirect materials. So I go to my T accounts, and here I have the 3105 in indirect materials coming out of the material storeroom, but instead of showing them as going into work in process, because that's only for direct materials, my indirect materials are part of overhead, and here's where it's showing coming in. Now again, this is my inside of overhead. It's also called the actual cost. Okay, and then the overhead that I apply is going on the right side, okay, on the outside. Okay, so this is on the actual cost side. So as soon as I have anything that's an actual overhead cost, I'm going to have to go to my overhead analysis sheet. And of course, I also have to show that 3105 on the materials ledger. Okay, so I'm going to go to the materials ledger, and that was indirect materials. So I go down and I find indirect materials, and I have the date. It was R6112, and we issued 3105 of indirect materials. There was 3304, And so there's $199 left in the account. Okay? Now I also need to go to the overhead analysis sheet. This is the this tab way over here at the other end, and this shows the date and then also under the total you're going to have the 3105, and then every time you put a total in the total column, you also have to put that number one more time in whatever column it belongs to. And so the 3105 is indirect material, so I'm going to put it there as well. So it goes two places, once in the total column and then once in whatever column it belongs to. All right. Here on the 15th, we purchased materials and services on account. We purchased some lumber for $15,000. Okay, so materials were coming in to the materials, and so here's the $15,000 there. Then I would go to my materials ledger. I would go to lumber. There's the 15th of June. Here's my $15,000 on the received side. Okay, and so I did have 5601 of lumber, and now I bought another $15,000 that's come in, and so now I have $20,601 of lumber, my running total balance. Okay, we also had building repair services, $798.32. That's not a material at all, but that's where we had to pay to have some building repairs. Well, building repairs are actual overhead. So I would go to overhead, and here it is here. That's an actual overhead cost. Now I have to go to my overhead analysis sheet, put in the date. Here's the $798.32. That was repairs and maintenance, so that also goes in the repairs and maintenance column. Okay, here is payroll. Payroll is two parts. It first shows you what the gross wages were. That has to go into the payroll labor clearing account, and then you allocate it between direct and indirect, which is on this part of the narrative here. So I go to my T accounts, and here is where the gross wages came in, and then there's the direct and the indirect coming right back out. Okay, here is now the direct labor is going into work in process. There it is right there, 10,592, just like this. Okay, it's coming out of the labor clearing and into the work in process. This is the indirect, the 8352, and so that's coming out of the labor clearing and going into overhead. Okay, so now I'm going to have to deal with the overhead analysis sheet and the job cost sheets. So I go to my job cost sheets, and when you looked on here, it told you what job, how many hours, and what the amount was. And so that was job 100. So I go to job 100 under the direct labor section. Here's the beginning balance of 6,000, and now I have my date. Here's the 600 hours. Here's the amount, 5406.03. And I go through each job cost sheet and punch in what goes in to that particular job as far as direct labor. Then I'm going to go back over here to my overhead sheet, and here is my $83.52 total, which also goes under my indirect labor column. And again, all of that is right here. There's the $83.52. Here's the total of $10,592 of direct labor, and it's all allocated versus by these jobs. Okay, let's take a look at a sale of finished goods. Here's where we sold 55 Doghouse Deluxe 2. This finished goods number 515 to the Horns Department Store for $160.50 each. Sales price on invoice 716. Now, we have two entries that we have to make. The sale itself to the customer is at the sales price of $160.50 that we're charging for each doghouse that we're selling them. But what we need for the inventory accounts is what's coming out of finished goods inventory is at the cost to us, which hopefully, of course, is less than $160.50. And so I have to figure out, well, what is that cost? So these are 55 doghouses and on finished goods number 515. So I'm going to go to my subsidiary ledger. Here's the finished goods ledger, and I'm going to find that particular finished goods. Here it is, Horns Department Store number 515. And we had 55 doghouses. Here's the balance. There's a receive section. That's when we complete a job and it leaves the factory and it comes into the distribution warehouse. The distribution warehouse is receiving that job. Here is where it's being shipped out and sold, and here's the balance of how much we have left over. So this is saying we had 55 doghouses sitting in the distribution warehouse. They cost us $107.30 a piece to make, and so we have a total of $59.01.50. So I'm going to put in the date. I'm going to put in a reference, invoice 716, and then under the sold section, I'm going to show how many were sold. 55 at $107.30. That's $59.01.50, and of course that means I have none left. So if this said units 155 at 107, then I was just showing 55, then I would still have 100 units at 107.30 still left. Okay, so now I have my number for the T account at what this cost me, $59.01.50. Okay, so now I'm going to go to the T accounts, and this is coming out of the distribution warehouse, which is my finished goods account, and it's going into the cost of goods sold, $59.01.50. But I had to calculate that, and if you have more than one type of cost on a particular order like that, you have to, it's FIFO, first in, first out. Okay. All right, and then also you're going to list the sales. Okay, and so the sales of this one at the 55 doghouses at $160.50 a piece is $88.27.50. So notice this is not a T account. You're just listing the sales down so that we can get a total sales for the month. Okay, so once we get through all the transactions for June, and it tells us to record those daily transactions in the T account and post to the subsidiary ledgers on a regular basis. And then we will get to the end of month procedures. And I will do that on a separate YouTube.